In this video, I want to talk to you about ND filters, a understanding on what they are, how to use them, and why every drone pilot needs these in their camera bag. So I'm sure you've heard of ND filters, but a lot of people still don't understand how to use these because there's so many different names and variations of these ND filters. So it is really confusing. There's lots of different advice out there. So I want to try and break this down and give you an understanding of this in literally like 10 minutes. So you can go away and have a better idea on how to either use your ND filters or why you need to go and pick these up as one of the main accessories for your drone. And to break it down, there's two main reasons why you should use an ND filter. So let's get into that first one. But before we do, make sure you hit that like button and let's go. So an ND filter is a neutral density filter. And what it does, it's basically like sunglasses. So this will reduce the amount of light going into the sensor on the drone. Just like a bright day, you would wear sunglasses to reduce the amount of light going into your eyes. These reduce the amount of light going into the drone. So why is that important? So the drone is going to be high up, so it's going to have lots of lights and reflections and glares going into that camera sensor. And this doesn't look very good for a few reasons. So an ND filter will go onto the front of the drone and then reduce the amount of light going in. So the ND filters, we have different strengths. They could range from an ND4 all the way up to an ND1000, and each one will have a different level of reducing the amount of light going into the sensor. So let's say, for example, it is a bright day. You could put an ND32 or an ND64 on, and it will reduce the amount going into that sensor by a significant amount. If it's like low light, it's sunrise, sunset, and it's not too bright, then an ND4 or an ND8 would suffice. And if it's cloudy, there's still going to be some light, an ND16 would then be good. And it's just about experimenting, but those are pretty much the fundamentals. So think of ND filters as sunglasses for your drones, and they're going to reduce the amount of light going in. Now, ND filters are extremely popular, not just on drones, but on cameras and Hollywood films all over the world. So ND filters are used all of the time. And for me, after batteries, it's the #1 accessory that I would use or want to use on any of my drones. The only time I don't use ND filters is when they're simply not available. When you don't use these, you're going to see a few shots here on the screen without an ND filter on. Some of these shots were basically because I couldn't get ND filters at the time. The drone was brand new. And you can see now over water, there are lots of glares and reflections because the drone didn't have an ND filter on. So that's ND filters. You've also got ND polarizing filters, and these reduce reflections on surfaces. So over water, over sea, these work brilliantly. Over buildings, which are really shiny and got reflections, it will reduce the reflections. And that's what a polarizing filter does. You can also adjust this wheel here to adjust the polarizing strength, so you can get different looks, make something look more vivid or saturated. These are great. So those are the two main popular ND filters. Now there are more, but I would recommend when you first get started, just stick to these, either normal ND filters or ND polarizing filters. But the DJI Mini 3 Pro has a downfall, which is this is a fixed 1.7 aperture. So if we could adjust this and have a higher aperture number, like on the DJI Mavic 3, that is adjustable, you could simply just adjust the aperture and that will reduce the amount of light. But on the DJI Mini 3 Pro, it is fixed at 1.7, which means it lets tons of light into this sensor and it can't be adjusted. So it means then that what DJI in the auto mode will do, it will boost that shutter speed, and that's what we're going to talk about now, the downsides of having a high shutter speed. And before we talk about shutter speeds, I want to tell you about my most used and cheapest subscription, and this is Surfshark VPN. You see, recently I was filming all day. I went back to the hotel. I went to watch my current series on Netflix I was into. So I went onto it and it was geo-locked. I couldn't access it because I was in Spain. Not a problem. With Surfshark VPN, you can virtually change your location to anywhere in the world. So I just typed in America and accessed American Netflix. I can also access HBO as well, which you currently can't in the UK. So it's great at virtually changing your location. It also keeps your data fully secure. You see, I'm not being tracked or watched because my IP address is fully encrypted using a VPN. And it's also great what I find for buying flight tickets or online shopping because I can change my location and often get a cheaper price. And talking about price, I mentioned this is my most used and cheapest. You see, this is not £10 or £20 a month. With my discount, you're going to get 83% off and an extra 3 months free. So it works out at under £2 a month, which is incredible value for what you get out of this. So if you want to go and check it out, I highly recommend Surfshark VPN. It's all linked in the top of the description, and they do a 30-day money-back guarantee as well. Let's get to shutter speeds. So think of shutter speeds as how sharp or blurry your video is going to look. So on the top scale, you're going to have a high shutter speed, and it's going to be really sharp. And on the other side of it, you're going to have a low shutter speed, and it's going to be blurry. So you don't want it to be either end of this spectrum. But on the Mini 3 Pro, let's not forget, it has that f1.7 aperture, which can't be adjusted. So the drone will automatically boost that shutter speed to keep the exposure correct. So what does all that mean? It means you're going to have a really sharp looking, over-processed video, which doesn't look great. We want to reduce that shutter speed, so it's going to look more natural, more what the human eye will see, and some motion blur. So if you try and do that without an ND filter on, with just a normal drone in Pro settings, as soon as you reduce that shutter speed to say 1/50, then it's going to be really overexposed, and you can see now it just looks terrible, and it's really hard to fix that. So what should the shutter speed be? Well, it states that it should be double your frame rate. So if you're filming in 4K 30, your shutter speed should be double that, so 1/60. And you can follow that rule depending on whatever you're filming in your frame rate, just double it. So if we do that now, so let's say it's a bright sunny day, and we take our ND filters, we'll get an ND64. We'll now take the cover off the drone, and these are great by freewell. They literally just clip straight on, so that ND filter is now in place. Now I can reduce my shutter speed, so I can bring it from like 1/2000, which is what the drone set it at, and bring it right down. My exposure is still correct, but now my shutter speed's lower, so I've got natural looking video with motion blur, and this is what I recommend and what I do all the time. And you can do this by literally just putting the ND filter onto your drone, looking at the exposure value, and if it's around the 0 mark, it's spot on. If it's +1 or -1, then that's still fine. If it's like +2 or -2, then it's underexposed or overexposed. It's just about getting it correct. But I've got one more tip for you as well, so not freak out. So I know loads of people get really fixated on this 180-degree shutter speed rule, but on the Mini 3 Pro, it is hard to achieve it 100% of the time. Do I follow it all the time? No. So don't get really fixated on this double your frame rate rule. Most of the time on the DJI Mini 3 Pro, I might have it at 1/100. I don't follow the 180-degree shutter speed all the time, but the main fundamentals are it's a lot lower than what the drone would have it at without an ND filter on. So shutter speeds, just get it in the mind of have a low shutter speed, so your footage is going to look a lot more natural, not the same overprocessed look as what it's going to look like without, and also some motion blur. But if you put an ND32 on and it's still overexposed, put an ND64 on. If you put an ND64 on here and it's still slightly overexposed, just increase your shutter speed up to say 1/100, and you'll find your exposure then is spot on. But that's basically what ND filters do. They reduce the amount of light coming in, so it's not going to be overexposed, but then they can also control your shutter speed, so your video is going to look so much better, much more natural. Just like all these video shots here, each and every single one of these has got an ND filter on. And ND filters are also great as well for different effects. So you might have seen these gold and blue streaks. These are basically just an ND filter with a gold or blue streak on it that you just clip on the front. You can also stop and freeze motion as well by having an ND 1000 or 2000. You can do loads of different things. I would just pick up the ND all day pack. It's going to give you 6 filters. It's going to cover you from an ND4 up to an ND64, and you get an ND 1000. That basically covers you all day. And it's the one I use the most. I use these more than polarizing filters. They just literally clip onto the front, super easy to use. And I always use the freewell ones. I've used different brands, but I always am using these on every single drone now. It's because they're scratch resistant, they're dust proof, and they are made of really good glass. Whatever camera I'm using, or whatever drone, I'm always using these. If you want to go pick these up, I really do recommend you getting these after getting some batteries. So it's all linked in the description down below, the ones I would recommend. They also do an ND mega pack, which gives you loads of different filters. So that's good value as well. But just go and pick up one of these, put them on your drone, and then just look back at the significant difference you're going to see from your video quality by using these ND filters. So I hope that gives you a better understanding of what ND filters are, how to use them, and the two main points that they're going to do to increase and make your footage look better. So if you did like that, please hit that like button. It really does help out. It means a lot. And make sure you subscribe. I've got loads more new content coming if you're new around here. I appreciate you watching this video. I hope you've learned something, and have a fantastic day. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.